The joy of having so many books at my disposal was immeasurable. My heart ached for Ella and my mother, yet fortune allowed me to forge bonds with peers of my age. Through perseverance, I made a name for myself at school and was well received by all. The world outside prison slowly grew on me, and the library became my sanctuary. Still, I deeply wished for my mother to share those moments with me. I felt this overwhelming urge to arm her with knowledge for a better life post-prison. However, to do so meant re-entering the very walls I'd escaped. That was a thought I recoiled from. I harbored dreams of a world devoid of hate, where prisons were redundant. Yet, reality was relentless. Time and again, circumstances dragged me back to the confines of the prison. It felt like a relentless cycle, as if our destiny was intertwined with those cold bars. The catalyst of it all was an eerie encounter with a man who claimed to be my father. As the sands of time slipped, I celebrated my 16th year. The face of my mother, which was once vivid in my mind, started becoming a distant memory. My life was a whirlwind of experiences and escapades, yet the echo of the prison, my first home, always resonated within me. One day, while engrossed in a book at a coffee shop, a familiar yet changed face entered. The distinct voice gave her away, the same prison guard who had once dealt me a hard blow. It took me a moment, the passage of years, and the absence of her uniform obscuring her identity. But when she spoke to place her order, there was no mistaking it. Her words from my final day in prison resonated with me. To thrive on the outside, you must first conquer the inside. Life beyond these gates isn't all that different. Understand that a prisoner and a prison guard are merely reflections of the same reality. Often, the distinction is drawn between guards as the heroes and inmates as the villains. But from my perspective, shaped by a childhood within prison walls, I know that guards are simply everyday individuals, perhaps from the very same streets as the inmates. Fate just dealt them a different hand. Compelled, I left my seat and approached her at the counter. I initiated a conversation, hoping she could shed light on the mysteries that had consumed my thoughts for so long. "Hello," I murmured tentatively. Her gaze lingered, attempting to connect the present to a past memory. "Vera, is that truly you?" she queried, a note of astonishment coloring her voice. A wave of relief washed over me knowing she recognized me. I was eager, on the verge of inundating her with a barrage of questions. Yet, the first one I posed changed the mood entirely. Inquiring about my mother's well-being, her expression shifted from surprise to solemnity. I braced myself, having assumed for so long that my mother had moved on, perhaps even relieved to be free of me. But what the guard revealed was heart-wrenching. My mother had been trapped in a living nightmare, longing for me incessantly. Every day since our parting, she had been a soul mourning its lost half. She always maintained it was for my benefit. If she truly wished for my well-being outside those prison walls, then why did she consistently turn away during my visits? The conundrum had always baffled me. However, the guard's revelations cast a new light on things. The day Ella departed wasn't just her exit from confinement. It was her farewell to this world. Ella had passed away that very day. Seeing me linger at the cell door, awaiting Ella's return, tore at my mother's heart. My youthful innocence made it hard to grasp the permanence of death, and she didn't want our parting to be any more painful. She was aware that at 7, the prison system would search for a place for me. She desired for me to be resilient, prepared for the world beyond, and hoped that I would not yearn for the confines of the prison. Leaving the cafe that day, my heart was heavy with newfound grief for my mother. I resolved to reunite with her, yet never did I anticipate that our reunion would demand the sacrifice of my liberty. That day, I hurried home, eager to share my revelation with Mr. and Mrs. Walker. However, I was taken aback to find an unfamiliar man conversing with them. As Mr. Walker caught sight of me, he beckoned to Vera, "Come and meet your father." My heart skipped a beat. My father? After all this time? What was his motive? What had transpired between them? It became evident he had come to reclaim me. His incessant questions focused on the funds Mr. and Mrs. Walker received for my care, the stipend they provided me, and other financial concerns. Alarmingly, he displayed no curiosity about my well-being, stoking my suspicions of his true intentions. As he concluded, declaring his return the next week to take me, I couldn't hold back. "He's an imposter," I cried out. If I truly had a father, he would have sought me out long ago. However, Mrs. Walker led me away, explaining that he indeed was my biological father, substantiated by my birth certificate. I was cornered, unable to deny his claim. The prospect of sharing a roof with him filled me with unease. The thought of cohabitating with a complete stranger was deeply unsettling. But a week later, I found myself bidding farewell to the Walkers, holding onto a promise to stay connected. This marked the second instance in my life where I had been pulled away from those I considered family. This man, who was supposedly my father, was far from nurturing. He constantly spewed profanities and had an unpredictable temper. One day, I observed him from a window as he stormed into the house, his anger palpable. Curious, I stepped outside to discern the cause of his outburst, only to find him in a standoff with a minuscule mouse that had dared to cross his path. But his temperament wasn't the sole issue. My so-called father exploited me. It was evident that his motivation to seek me out was purely monetary. Unsatisfied with what he gained from my presence, he compelled me to leave school and secure a job at a local bar. The earnings I made were siphoned off by him, while he lounged at home, glued to the television. Gradually, his hostility towards me intensified. He would deny me basic necessities, berating me without cause. In a moment of desperation, I pleaded to see my mother, but he adamantly declined. That was the last straw for me. He sealed off the windows and imprisoned me within our own home for over a week. Enduring such maltreatment became unbearable. To think that he had already taken away my beloved education, and now this added torment. The contrast between my incarcerated mother, a gentle soul, and my tyrannical father, who roamed free without accountability, was striking. The injustice was overwhelming. Ironically, during my time behind bars, I overheard fellow inmates discuss their intentions to commit offenses upon release. It became clear to me that for some, those declarations were merely a strategy to seek refuge back inside. Perhaps they recognized that, at times, the outside world could be far more treacherous than prison walls. The notion of consciously plotting a crime had never previously crossed my mind, but desperation and fear can drive one to extremes. Trapped with this tormentor, I reached a breaking point. Grabbing a chair, I shattered the house windows, subsequently alerting the police of my actions. Arriving officers arrested me for the destruction, an unusual scenario perhaps, but one which I hoped would distance me from my father and bring me closer to the prison's familiar walls. Once back behind bars, the presiding officer considered releasing me, but I desperately implored him not to return me to my father's grasp. My tears failed to sway him, so in a final act of defiance, I shattered his office window. Is this sufficient grounds to keep me here? I silently pondered. But instead of being confined once more, the officer beckoned me to sit. "Why do you so fervently desire to remain in prison, Vera?" he queried. I opened up about the torment I endured outside, expressing my longing to reside within the prison's confines, amidst the only family I had ever known. He rose from his chair, remarking, "Very well. You might wonder, could it really be that straightforward? Is it feasible for someone to merely choose a life in prison? Typically, no." But the officer grasped the depth of my wish to reunite with my mother and understood that this was also a path to extricate me from my father's malevolent grasp. Re-entering the cell felt more liberating than when I first discovered the allure of the school library, a peculiar sentiment I concede. On seeing me, my mother seemed to look right through the grown woman before her. Time had etched its passage on me, yet she appeared preserved in a stasis from our last encounter. At my call, "Mom," she was overwhelmed with emotion, collapsing in tears. We embraced, a profound moment of reunion that stretched minutes into what felt like an eternity. I finally whispered, "I've returned to be with you." Her confusion was evident as she queried, "But how?" I recounted my recent trials. And so I found my sanctuary back within prison walls. While it wasn't ideal, it was a haven compared to the tyranny of the imposter claiming to be my father. My mother's emotions were a mix of elation and concern. During my incarceration, I shared with the inmates the wealth of knowledge I had gleaned from books, ensuring their time was one of growth and enlightenment. I looked at her, puzzled by where she was going with this. She took a deep breath, eyes still fixed on the blue expanse above us, and explained, "The sky is vast and boundless. Every cloud, every bird, every plane has its own path, its own destiny. Just like those people in the airplane, soaring high and free, we all have our own journeys." She paused and turned to face me. "In this prison, it's easy to forget there's a world outside these walls, a world filled with choices and chances. We're like the clouds, sometimes dark and brooding, sometimes light and fleeting. But even in captivity, we have the power to choose our perspective, to choose our destiny. She then squeezed my hand. The sky reminds me of that freedom, the freedom of choice, of thought. And even though our bodies are trapped here, our minds and souls can soar, just like that eagle or the people on that plane. It was a profound moment, one where the wisdom of her years became evident. While the physical walls of the prison bound us, our spirits remained unshackled. This conversation with her forever changed how I viewed my time in prison. It wasn't just about waiting for release, but learning, growing, and finding freedom in the midst of confinement. "Where do you think that plane is headed?" she asked me. My response was instinctive. "Who knows? Does it matter?" She then shifted her gaze from the expanse of the sky to meet my eyes. The weight of her years and wisdom bore into me. "Don't you see, Vieira? Those people on that plane have a direction. They're moving forward, seeking destinations, experiencing life's ebb and flow. Here in these walls, time stands still for us. Life outside is dynamic, evolving." For a moment, her words hung in the air between us, and then they sank in. The sky, in its vastness, wasn't just a reminder of freedom. It was a symbol of progression, of life's relentless forward motion. In the span of that brief conversation, my perspective shifted. The prison I had so vehemently defended, the sanctuary I thought I had found, suddenly seemed more like a stagnant pond than a refuge. I realized that if I truly wanted to make a difference, I had to be part of that ever-moving world outside. My mission became clear: to complete my education and return to the prison not as an inmate, but as an educator and mentor. To help those women prepare for life beyond bars, equipping them with the tools to find their own direction, just like those people on the plane. And so I stepped out from the confines of the prison, not just to embrace freedom, but to use that freedom for a greater purpose. I returned to the prison, but this time with a vision to guide and uplift, ensuring that those walls became a stepping stone to a brighter future for many. Reflecting on my journey, I can assertively say that the lessons I learned in prison have enriched my life, even during the times I wasn't behind bars. Moreover, I have been privileged to touch the lives of many inmates, guiding them towards a brighter future. I always held onto the belief that beneath the scars and mistakes, there lies inherent goodness in everyone. Today, I make it a point to visit my mother in prison every week. Simultaneously, I'm dedicated to my work and furthering my education, ensuring that when my mother is released, she steps into a world that's welcoming and supportive. She has weathered countless storms, and I am determined to provide her a sanctuary when she's finally free.